Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to sync one more time with like main architectures of both versions we have. Now when Camille's back, and now when we have way more POC completed and working, I would say. So just to recap, like, yes, like the last week we were discussing it with Jaime, and we kind of were a little inclined to choose individual resources or direct object storage, just because it felt like it was a less risky approach. And there were some problems, like Jakob mentioned, this thread safety concern. I have another concern which wasn't there actually, but yeah, I had it in my head. Yeah, so now actually I think like hopefully today we can reach some kind of final decision and start executing on it. So just to like recap, my current position is that I like zip approach a little more, even though I haven't finished reading the POC, but like from the architectural standpoint, just getting rid of all these extracted files and managing them would be super, super nice. So yeah, and basically, like, yeah, this is my position. I would like to go over any concerns we currently have and address them, or like find out that they are blocking us and we need to switch the direction. Yeah. So I guess, Camille, do you?
Sorry, I just have to ask this. You mentioned that you had a concern about the zip approach of your own that different from the one I raised. Is that on the agenda? Because I'm curious what it is.
Yeah, it was. I saw that like basically.
If it's on the agenda, we'll get to it, so we don't have to. But I just want to make sure we don't miss it because I'm curious.
I thought I may have removed it, but I'll add it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, maybe Camille, you want to recap your current position and what you've done for the last couple of days.
So, like, I wanted like to reconfirm some of my thoughts because like I did this investigation pretty long time ago about the zip. So I kind of like thank you very much for creating this VFS abstraction. It's actually like pretty like good first step that we have to refine anyway. So like I spent significant amount of time like to building on top of that abstraction to actually create even more abstraction for handling. And like if you read my latest comment, like what I achieved really like with my zip is being complete. Let's say like it's being pretty complete as for the performance characteristic that I wanted to validate. So like my latest MR, like I can serve using GCS docs GitLab.com zip archive directly and being pretty efficient at that time. Kind of like I'm assuming that like doc GitLab.com represents maybe pages of like the bigger size rather than the smaller size. So like my latest zip POC tries to like be not finished, but complete in a sense of like what like the general performance characteristic we can get out of this approach, measure memory usage. But these aspects, they are not like really fully optimized. There could be maybe like optimized twice-fold than what you get from that, but it should give you like pretty good sense how this solution would work if you would try to serve docs GitLab.com, which I think is like one of these bigger pages to serve, because I tested my zip against docs GitLab.com, which is like 700 megabyte zip that is containing 25 thousands of files, and it just works. Like, it's efficient, it's fast. Like reading central directory when I'm using my local Minio takes 30 milliseconds of something. Serving individual files on my local computer, I achieve 1500 files per second, being completely thread safe and concurrent serving from zip stored on the object storage. So like, I kind of reconfirmed my thinking about the zip. It's like, it can be performant. It's not too complex. And to be fair, I find the complexity of adding zip not be with zip, but with VFS abstraction that we have to refine further, which is kind of like common for zip and direct OS. So how I see that is like, it works, it's performant, it's fast, it can handle doc.gitlab.com today, and I can even like use my local internet to handle doc.gitlab.com. Of course, latency gonna be worse because I have 300 milliseconds to the GCS in the US, and like, but it works. What else I can add? It just works. It requires refining. It requires extra time to build VFS abstraction, which is like common for both. And I think like the majority of that complexity lies with the VFS abstraction, but not with the zip versus direct OS, because both of these are simple and like straightforward if you kind of like know the behavior of how you want to serve from zip versus how you want to serve from the object storage. So this is my summary, really, like my perception. Like I confirmed my thoughts about the performance, and like you can really try that on your own and see how it works.
Yeah, thanks, Camille. Yeah, I actually also like Jakob, as you like was main advocate for the opposite approach. I saw you also try and zip on your own. So what is your current position? What do you think?
I think both of these things can work, and well, what happened with me was that I was thinking about, I had an intuitive preference against the zip approach because it just seemed complex and like you needed to know too many details about how zip files work. But I was thinking about it and I thought, well, I wanted to convince myself if it's really worse or not. So that's why I sat down on Monday and tried to write something to see how complex it would be. And it's very similar. And if I had to make a choice between the two, it would be difficult for me to make a choice, even after having thought about it so long. So I don't think either choice is bad. I think both of them are going to work. So just pick one and go. That's my, it's, yeah. I don't think I need to say more.
Yeah, thanks. That's actually a great summary, and I feel the same. Yeah, I guess what we like need to do then is like, let's assume that I guess right now we have a little more preference towards zip. So I guess we should just go over the concerns we have about it. And one of the biggest one on the agenda, the only one which has any comments, is about ranged requests. And I saw, Jakob, that you mentioned that's like about 1% of the traffic is range requests. So from my perspective, actually 1% is a lot. And we probably can just say that we remove this functionality completely.
Yeah, I think it's a little difficult because for some things, range requests are super important. And if your server no longer supports range requests, it's like game over. And ironically, Pages itself works this way because Pages needs to talk to object storage and do range requests against object storage. And if that wouldn't work, it would be game over. But we're not talking about Pages talking to object storage. We're talking about our users talking to Pages. And looking at the logs, I cannot say with confidence what our users are using range requests for. And the two most obvious examples of what they are for, if I would have to explain it quickly to a layperson, is I think the best example is a video file. If you're looking at a video file and you want to jump to the middle, if your server doesn't support range requests, then your browser needs to suck in all the data up to the middle before it can start playing there. With the range request, it can just jump and go there. So if you think about that, that's great that that is possible, but it is not absolutely necessary. And we don't even know if people are hosting video files on GitLab Pages and if this is what they need range requests for. So some users might be very disappointed if it goes away, and maybe they just don't even notice. Another thing is that it could be that browsers are using range requests on behalf of the users to make their user experience a little bit better, but the users might not notice if their user experience gets a little bit worse. We don't know unless we know what people actually use them for. So I think this is a difficult, this is a difficult choice. It's, from my point of view, if we were building Pages today and we would say to our users, here, this is Pages, it doesn't support range requests, but here's your website. And as a user, I would say, awesome. I'd be completely fine with that. But that's not our situation. It supports it now, and we don't know if users will mind if it goes away. On the other hand, like, you can do extra work and get support for range requests back, even with zip files. It's just like you, it's not it would be extra work, and people would be disappointed in the meantime until you've done that. But it's not like you completely cut off the road towards that. So yeah, does this help? I thought I'd just explain what I wrote there.
Well, I think what's helpful is that if there is a path to get it back, then it's just a case of iterating on the way there. And then also, once you have released it without the range requests, you can see how many users do complain and how many users actually do require this. And then you can decide how important it is to put it back in.
Yeah.
You may find that it's one small user. You might find that it's all the users, but you don't know.
Yeah, or it might be one mega contract for a self-managed installation where they say, we're not buying this thing, and we miss a huge deal because it's an Evit, and then we know, like, okay, we go and do that. Another thing to consider is,
you know how much it's worth, yeah.
Yes, and another thing to consider is that no matter what we do, this new backing store of Pages needs to be rolled out incrementally. So if we find out as we're rolling it out that users are unhappy, we can actually say, okay, sorry, we just put you back on the old system, we put you back on NFS, and we go back and build this. So even from, I think we need to have a gradual rollout mechanism anyway, so the risk is also manageable on that front, that individual users could be rolled back.
So really, like, my thoughts are with Jakob on range requests, on impact, and the rollout. Like, we have a way to support it. It's like, it's not straightforward to do it in the first iteration. So I guess it's my thoughts with Jakob on that one.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to, I agree with the incremental rollout idea. I guess we can find out, and if we need to, we can implement it later. But like, if we need to, how it like works in your head? It's just us downloading the file locally and making a SIG on it?
No, I think what I would do is the file comes from CI, the zip file, and it lands on Sidekick, and Sidekick needs to do something with it. So you can take a zip file, read all its contents, and create a new zip file. And inside the zip file, you have a choice of using compression or not. So you could recreate the zip file without compression, so it gets a lot bigger. But once there's no more compression in the zip file, then we can seek wherever we want inside the individual files.
So actually, like the better idea could be, I saw some MR on the runner side to allow you to define compression. And like I saw even like MR on the runner side for people to basically do not compress files that cannot be compressed, like Debian, zip, JPEG, PNG. It doesn't make sense to recompress them. It's kind of wasteful CPU cycles. So it could be as well, maybe it's even shipped in the GitLab runner. Maybe it's even like you just specify environment variable compression level to 0.
It's the same idea, right? Like you put a special zip file on there that happens to be called a zip file, but is not compressed. Like technically that's possible, and then you have it.
So like this could be like handled already. Like we've just create zip file that is not compressed, like individual files, and like it's gonna be supported then by us. So I mean, like I saw a bunch of the MR on GitLab runner, people asking for this kind of compression control, not for the reason of the pages, but for the reason of the time it requires to create archive in the first place. And it's kind of like wasteful. So it's maybe already solved really, like in a way that like allow people to control that.
Yeah, and even if you do that, so if the people at the CI level say, I want this thing to not be compressed, at the moment Pages has to serve it, it can look at the metadata and see, well, this thing does not have compression, so now I can do a range request. And other things it can say, I can't do a range request because this thing is compressed. So you could even make it dynamic like that. I'm not sure if that would be my first choice, but you have that flexibility, I think. Does that, Vladimir, does that give you enough of an idea of what it would look like if we had to do this?
Yeah, actually great. And I didn't have anything similar in my head, so that is actually very, very helpful. Okay, yeah, do we have any other concerns about zip architecture? Anyone?
What was the concern you mentioned in the when you started the meeting?
Yeah, I like if we go with pre-signed links to object storage, I thought that they will be expired at some point, and we need to handle this expiration. And then I realized that we actually cache only for a certain period of time. So anyway, it's not a big problem.
Yeah, it's fiddly, but it can be done. Like you can create a link that is valid for 24 hours, and then maybe Rails needs to tell Pages, here is a link, don't use it after 24 hours, and then Pages needs to be smart about whether it uses the link or not. So it's complexity, but it's not like you cannot solve this problem.
So,
yeah, it's
so correct me if I'm wrong, but like our API, like it limits how long the entry is being persisted, and like you have to refresh the domain every some time, and like we could probably define this timeout long enough that this caching will always refresh the URL.
If you refresh the zip file every time you refresh the domain config, you may be reloading the zip file too often, like because you have to build an index into the zip file every time you open it. So you might want to do that on a slower cadence than the domain config. But
yes, it's kind of doable, because like one aspect is like you want to like update signed URL versus like retaining as much metadata as you can to not reload it too often, right? So there are probably like ways to handle that pretty cleanly, I guess.
does that address, I mean, Vladimir, you already said it was more or less addressed, but does it feel like you know what to do here?
Yeah, it was almost the same in my head. Okay, yeah, any other concerns? No?
My only concern really is like memory usage to holding all like this metadata in the memory. We would probably have to check exactly how much of the metadata we can hold. I mean, amount of the files. And like,
yeah, at one point you have to say, like, if your zip contains too many files, we're just not going to serve your site. Put a limit on that. And even when you put a limit on that, it could be that we have so many active so many active sites at the same time that we are using too much memory on the pages server. But I think that would be a while before we have that problem. And
so like,
even then you can start doing things, but I don't think that is something to worry about in this iteration. I think we can go a long way on this architecture of just saying we have all the file names in memory and it's going to be fine.
So like from what I checked some time ago, there was something like 100 to 500 unique domains per like 60 seconds. So we are really looking at that number today, even if it's maybe like 10 times more, it still like seems manageable. And like, even if in my POC, I saw, Jakob, that like you started also being more efficient in persisting data. So we have like number of ways to make it like more space efficient. I mean, the only my suggestion would be is like limit the amount of the files that we accept.
That is the first thing you would try. Like just say to people, like, if you have 1 million files on your pages site, and we just say sorry, that doesn't work.
That doesn't work, but like it doesn't work in any case, and like we allow that today based only on the size, really. And
yeah,
it would be nice to have anyway, to be fair.
I don't think it's a wall we're going to run into soon, and when that wall starts coming up, then yeah, maybe we have to do some more hard work to come up with a new system. But I think that would be a good problem to have.
Okay. Also, Camille, you mentioned on the Slack and in the MRs that Simlinks is still tricky. And if I got it, it's still not implemented for Zip, right?
I did not implement that for Zip because I'm trying like kind of like rework the current schemes that like you put in the code, which is actually a great idea. But I want to like do it that is like we have the same Simlink implementation, and like the interface that was proposed for the VFS, which is like readlink, just stays the same. So like the Simlink handling basically is behaving the same for the both types, which is like
I don't see a problem with Simlinks. Can you explain briefly what the problem is with Simlinks in your view, Camille? Like with zip files, I don't see a Simlink problem.
It's not about the problem. It's about like generalizing the current code, really, because like eval Simlinks. So like the first step I tried to do, which is completely unrelated to Zip, is like eval Simlinks tried to traverse the whole path that you are putting, and I wanted to do some kind of crazy sanity checking on what you are traversing, and it was kind of causing me some troubles.
Okay, but that's not maybe not even necessary, because even if you traverse something to somewhere bad, like you cannot open it because it's not in the zip file.
Yes, like it's not the problem on the zip really, but like.
And we already have sanity checks for Simlinks, because that's one of the ideas, is that we keep the same sanity checks we already had. So we don't necessarily have to make a safer system, because we can just keep what we have.
Yes, and I completely agree with that. But I'm trying to generalize that a little to be like coherent, and this kind of gives me a little hurdles.
Okay, so you're trying to make something even better than we really need, and this is the problem with Simlinks, that you want something better.
I don't know if it's better, but something slightly different. I mean, adding another layer of abstraction.
Would it be a blocker for Vladimir if that idea doesn't work out, or if you don't have time to do that?
It's gonna work out. Just give me like 1 more week, and I'm just gonna finish the demo.
Okay, to me it sounds like this is not a blocker, but if you think you're going to have it anyway, then that is also probably also works.
No, I mean, like if we agree that this is like this abstraction is in general a good way to do, I'm just gonna find a way to make it like working properly. So I was kind of playing with different approaches so far. Like probably in the last basically 1.5 days, I tried like 2 or 3 different approaches. I kind of got my feeling what is like the best way. So I guess it's really like, if you could take a look, both of you, on the abstraction, if this abstraction is fine, I'm just gonna make this abstraction work in the generic way, basically. So that's it. Nothing really deal breaker, rather like time limits that I had on my work here.
Yeah, my general instinct is to avoid making things shinier if we don't have to. So that's why I was asking.
Okay. Another thing, like we already spoke a little about memory and like limiting files. Like, do you see any other ways to like make pages don't work? For example, we like recently had like attack when people were trying to establish connections and we were hitting API very, very hard. So is that like something similar possible with zip approach or direct object storage? I don't know, maybe reading this.
I think you have the problem in, yeah, you can do bad things in both cases with what you call the direct approach. There's one central cache, and if people make sure that a lot of garbage goes into that cache, then useful stuff falls out the other end, and then things become slow for people. So you have a kind of service degradation, denial of service thing. And yeah, if somebody would create a crazy amount of pages sites and then makes a request to each of them in a row, then it forces pages to load the zip index for each of those things, and then it pushes out other people's zip indexes, and then their requests become slower. So I think you can do bad things in both cases, and I'm not really sure if it's hard to distinguish these sort of things from just general traffic. So I may be wrong, but my first thought is to just have good monitoring and to learn from these things as they happen and rely on humans to detect that there's abuse going on. Maybe that is a bad answer because we cannot just throw humans at everything. But I'm not sure if either approach is, probably either approach can be gamed this way if somebody wants to.
I think the most important thing you said there is about having having good monitoring in place, because you can use a human to interpret what the monitoring is telling you and then tell you what you need to build after the fact. I think people are going to break it in interesting and strange ways, and that's true of any aspect of the system. But at least if the monitoring is a consideration from the get-go, it's easy to resolve them when they happen.
But both of these things rely on an in-memory cache of attributes of metadata to be fast. And if somebody can push the metadata out of that cache, then things become slow. So you would watch for evictions. And if there's too many cache evictions, then something strange is going on. And that's something that you can easily put a metric on in each case. And yeah, humans need to look at it and understand what the bad things are that happen in the real world.
So I would add another thing, like, but like each request doesn't cost us money for the egress traffic. If we are in the same GCS region, but each request costs us money because of the request being executed. And like, we basically fight for every request because every request, additional request, costs us extra money, basically. And like, the tricky part is like, it doesn't cost us at all if we like fetch data from the middle, whatever amount of data that we transfer. But us doing 2 requests versus 1, like we are paying twice more amount of money on requests. And this is going to be a new cost that we're going to be adding into system. So like, if there are ways for us to, and it's also kind of like related to DOS, like someone can make us pay twice amount of money for some requests, requesting the same file over and over. So if we can somehow get to this ideal scenario of single request on doing this stuff, then like we're gonna save some money. But like it's maybe like not at the first iteration, rather like as a cost optimization later. But like you also to make you aware. I don't know how much, like 10,000 requests for the get likely cost something around $0.05, 5 cents or something. So it's not like a big saving, but it's something to put into consideration.
Perhaps what is worth doing is for the rollout strategy that you have, part of the rollout strategy should be to get in touch with Davis Townsend, who is the financial analyst for infrastructure, and tell him that this is coming and to watch what the traffic, or how the traffic patterns change. And he'd be able to then tell us just to provide more information about what he sees in terms of the traffic patterns, and if anything has to be done immediately, or if it's something that can be addressed later.
It's a bit hard to compare because the pricing model is different. Right now, we pay a fixed cost per gigabyte for storage, and we rent an NFS server by the minute or something like that. So you have time costs for the NFS server, and you have gigabyte costs for the storage. And with object storage, you pay per gigabyte, but you also pay for every time you pull something out. So instead of paying a fixed amount a month for an NFS server, you pay based on the amount of actual work that has to be done getting data out of storage. So it's difficult to compare the two. And yeah, I imagine that our financial analyst would be able to tell us what it looks like once it happens.
But like Jakob, like one thing that we will be able to compare like later is amount of the requests that we fired. Basically, because we even have this metric today. No, we don't yet have this metric, but we would have the metric amount of the requests that
we almost do, because the virtual file system adds counters. So we'll also know how many times we need to open a symlink and things like that.
Yes, but like it doesn't translate directly. But like we're gonna have probably a metric for actual HTTP calls to the bucket. So it's gonna. I think like my perception is really that like the sum gain, I mean the cost NFS versus storing data on an object storage and using requests is gonna be in the end cheaper anyway.
That's what I expect, but it's not a calculation I can just do on paper and say, look, this is obviously cheaper. The cost per megabyte is obviously lower, but you have this new cost for every request and how many requests you need to make to pay for the rent of the NFS server.
So technically, like what we could even do today, like get amount of the request to pages that it happened like in the 7 days, and kind of you get maybe multiply that by 3 times amount of that request, and this gives you like the rough estimate how many requests you're gonna have to object storage and how much we're gonna pay for this request in the ideal case. It's like it's gonna be let's say upper boundary really. Because like the implementation is gonna translate 1 point something multiplied by that amount of the requests.
I agree. We could do a rough estimate, but would it change our decision? Are we going to say let's not do object storage because it's too expensive?
No, it's not gonna change, but it's gonna give you some understanding of the cost savings really. Because we know how much we pay money for NFS. Something that we have to store additionally.
I think
that seems for later.
I think that while that's a noble goal to have, I think that it's going to take an amount of time that maybe is not best spent on that. I think that the cost savings, I don't think that the cost savings predictions are as useful as the cost savings actuals when it comes in place. I think the problem comes in is that if it's not a cost savings, if it turns out to be way more expensive to do this. But if we're assuming that the costs are going to be roughly the same, then I think doing that analysis is probably just taking time that's not needed right now.
Unless the cloud providers are being extremely exploitative on a pure economic level, it should be cheaper, because we're using a service that is optimized to do just one thing in the case of object storage, and right now we're using general purpose servers and general purpose storage, and that should be more expensive than a system that's optimized for just object storage. I don't know if that's a good argument, but that's my gut feeling, that unless they're cheating us, it ought to be cheaper.
It's also my feeling, like it should be cheaper by significant factor.
Okay, I guess time is running out, so we can go to the next items on the agenda. Rachel, you have a migration topic.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that it's worth, even though you don't have to have a strategy in place right now for what it will be, it's just worth starting to think about it and including that in any estimates that are provided for the duration of the project, just because migrations and rollouts tend to take more time than people expect. And I just wanted to call that out at the beginning.
Yeah, I guess what I will do is just add another to do for like starting to work on some POC for migration.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's not a firm POC right now, just that it's taken into consideration, because there've been other projects where we've seen either some re-architectural rewriting happen where a migration is required and the migration is not considered as part of the end of the project. It's delivered, but we can't actually use it in production because the migration hasn't happened, and then that lands up taking an additional 6 months. So that was the only reason for calling that out here.
Yeah, or sometimes people design something where they think, well, if we start with an empty GitLab server and we put everything on this, it works. And that is very natural because that's what GDK looks like. And so whatever, and this is a problem on the Rails side mostly, like, so whatever we do on the Rails side, we need to assume there is old data in the old system and it has to keep working. We need to assume a hybrid situation where we can move projects between one and the other. And if that thought comes way at the end of the process, then you've built stuff that doesn't work. So that needs to be early part of the process.
Vladimir, I would propose that like we have another meeting about like the timeline, steps, and iteration, and like where we like look for like each iteration to be shipped, to kind of give have like the good sense of like what comes at what point and at what point we gonna be testing different parts of the system, and at what point we expect this project to be complete. So we could give like the clear message to everyone exactly how this execution is being done, I mean, of this project, and like they could also track. But basically, like we could spend some time on like ensuring and creating all issues, documenting that, and like trying to put them in the right order, trying to maybe also declare dependencies, and at what point we expect like the initial testing, initial rollout on the gitlab.com, how we're gonna be testing on the gitlab.com initially. Like these are the items that like we can kind of, at this moment, I think we have enough knowledge that we could try to like to create this blueprint. It's gonna, of course, modify, but it would give like others and like Rachel and like other people good sense of like where we are at this process and what is the timeline.
I think that would be much appreciated from more parties than just infrastructure as well. I think this is a very important project that's being looked at from a variety of different places, and having all of that information, like everything that's known now, captured in issues and to-do lists and plotted out as far as possible in terms of a project plan. I think that would be super helpful to a large number of people.
Yeah, yeah, I do agree. Let's have this meeting. And I guess I need some time to prepare my my thoughts for it. But
I also think a large part of that can be done asynchronously, because I think that a lot of that is to produce the plan itself and then to have it reviewed. I'm not sure if having everyone on a call right at the beginning is necessarily the best thing. I think a large part can be done async.
What do you think if we can schedule this meeting, let's say next week somewhere, just to give me a deadline to prepare all, to complete all the sync part. I will do something, ping you, Camille, and other folks, and see how it goes. So basically, yeah, I need a couple days to finish my stuff. Then I ping everyone, and we can have a meeting next week.
Sure.
Well, I think we'll leave that very much up to you, because I think that we'll still be here to be supportive of things and to review anything that it is that you'd like us to review. But I think that scalability doesn't need to be part of that additional meeting.
Okay.
Vladimir, like if you need any help at any point of even outlining something ahead of time, just reach to me. I'm gonna be happy to help you at any moment.
Okay, thanks a lot. Actually, thank you all for a lot of support on this. Yeah, okay. Rachel, you also have a next item about Geo.
Yeah, there was just another consideration, is to just think about adding Geo support after the fact as well. I know that they've been interested in this for quite some time, as there's some large customers that are interested in having pages be supported by Geo, and they're waiting for decisions on the architecture side to know what to do next. That was just another thought that'll have to come at some point.
Okay, I guess I will outline the main points of the architecture. Something like we have object storage, we will store zip files and use API to get information where it is, and I will just ping Geo team to review that and see how they can incorporate this into the Geo architecture, because I'm not familiar with it myself.
So there is one thing about the Geo. I think Geo doesn't synchronize object storage. As long as you have data on the object storage, it seems like it's synchronized differently, separately. Rachel, am I correct?
Yeah, if you're using object storage, because you're using the replication features of object storage at that level, you don't really have to do much on the Geo side. But I also know that with the new self-service framework that they've been building, it's much easier to add Geo support than it used to be. So it's worth reaching out to them. I don't know what the state of Geo is in the last 4 months, so it's worth reaching out to them to just find out what would need to happen for this.
So from our perspective, it may be confirming our architecture, our behavior. If it's being replicated not by Geo itself, then it should be pretty plug and play, really pointing to different buckets and the system to work just right away.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's the end of the agenda. I just put my to-dos at the end. Anything else while we're still here?
If you do come up with anything that you think is a scaling concern, or with the migration and the rollout strategy, please reach out. We're more than willing to help on those types of specific things. We're still going to be working towards this decoupling Puma, and we want to be as supportive as we can to try and help get through this, because we recognize that this is a major undertaking and significant. So yeah, please do reach out if you need anything from us.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, also, I don't know. If everyone agrees, and it seems like everyone agrees that zip is working and we should go this way, or at least we can go this way without without big problems. So I guess we do. And yeah, I have my to-dos. Like many of them will probably just be collecting the plan and discussing it with Camille and other folks. And yeah, start doing this.
So Vladimir, I think like my perspective about Zip is like, I'm pretty convinced that this is working, but I'm also considering this like the two-way decision. So what I'm looking really at now, what is the most minimal thing that we can ship from like this architecture and start testing that on some projects, like knowing the known deficiencies of like artifacts management. Maybe we could start using this architecture for doc.gitlab.com and kind of like I validated that like kind of locally, but production characteristic is always different. So I'm always considering my ideas to be two-way decision. So the next step is really like, what is the most minimal thing that we can ship as quickly as possible, knowing the deficiencies and knowing how to fix them in the next step to actually like try that, ensure that it's working. Use like real world example of doc.gitlab.com maybe, and like actually measure that. So this is really my aim at this moment. Like we work on the plan, but we also work on doing the most minimal iteration to have things to be in a place, maybe not fully finished, maybe not the most performance optimized, but actually be exposed to running production traffic and seeing how it actually behaves using some real world examples. This feedback gonna give us confidence or gonna say to us that this is the wrong way. And I just hope that the sooner we have this smaller iteration, it's gonna be easier for us to be like confident in what we did. And like, as always, the decisions are two-way. Like we are not ruling out, but like we should be being very iterative to trying out that as quickly as possible.
I want to add a little bit to that because I agree very much with what Camille is saying. Like we don't have to get the zip thing working perfectly. We have to get it working, and we have to get the capability to put some projects in production on it and see if it works. I just wanted to point out that an extra advantage of that is that we also get a feeling for what the migration looks like, because it will force us to build things that allow us to put one project on object storage. It will force us to be able to pull that project back off of object storage and think about what that looks like. And by thinking and having to build those things, we can gain more confidence about what the whole overall project of the migration will look like. So by not just focusing on the pages side, but having like a iteration, like a thin slice across the entire range, will teach us something about the problems at each different stage, and that is very valuable.
Yeah, actually, I think we can test without the migration strategy, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, because basically we can test just using artifacts, archives we already have. I had this very small POC, like 30 lines of code doing this. So I guess we should start with that. And maybe then, like next issue, we need to think about the same test in production, but for the migration strategy.
Yeah, I don't want to suggest it's bad if you start with here. I think artifact zip is probably not the end goal, but yeah, if you can get it out there like that, that is great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we can end if no more ideas here. Okay. I'll stop the recording then.